Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing Roadmaster's diode wiring for towed vehicles on a 2021 Jeep Wrangler. Now this is available in a few different configurations. You can get your diode wiring with no end on it, or you can get a 4-pole attached. You can also get it with a 6-pole adapter, and you can also pick it up with a variety of umbilical cables that are going to match your tow bar needs. There's 5 main components when flat towing a vehicle, and starting on the vehicle side, you're going to have the base plate, and that's going to attach to the frame or the structural support of the vehicle, allowing an attachment point not only for our tow bar but for all the rest of our components. And that leads us to the tow bar, which is going to be the connection point between that base plate and the hitch on the RV. Now also attached to the base plate is going to be where our safety cables go, and that's just going to make sure in case of a disconnect we're still attached to our RV. We also have our diode wiring, which is going to transmit the light signals from the RV to the towed vehicle, including your running lights, brake lights, and turn signals, and that way people behind you know what you're doing. You also have your supplemental braking system, and that way the vehicle slows and stops when you apply the brakes on the RV. And also there's a breakaway cable here, so in case everything fails catastrophically, it's going to pull this cable and put the brakes on the vehicle so it's not rolling down the highway. Now, diode wiring is pretty simple, and if you plan on towing more than a few times a year, it's a great option. You don't have to worry about magnetic lights mounting up. But since your vehicle kind of becomes a trailer, you want to have those lights work with the RV, and that way when you use your running lights, turn signals, and brake lights, it's going to illuminate on the back of the vehicle, keeping you safe and legal. And all of this is accomplished by running from the 7-pole on your RV to the 6-pole mounted on the front of the towed vehicle, through the diode wiring, through the diodes, to your taillights. Now you can get that 4-pole option here, and that's going to give you that same light sequence, but going to a 6-pole allows you to add other accessories to this that need 12-volt power. So if you have a charge line that you want to put on your vehicle, your 6-pole is going to be the best way to accomplish that. And installation is pretty simple. You're simply going to have your plug up front that you're going to attach your wires to, and you're going to run it back to your taillights where you're going to splice into the factory harness, which seems scary, but really it's not too bad. You just have some spade connectors that you'll make connections, and that way you retain all your normal light functions when just driving the vehicle. Now, something I will recommend too, depending on your braking system, some of them will tie into the diode wiring, so when you run it, sometimes I recommend putting an extra loop of wire through the engine bay or wherever you're going to make your connections. That way it's easier to tie in. I'm going to walk you through the entire installation, and that way you can see how to get your diode wiring set up. Now our base plate came with the mounting bracket for our 6-pole wiring, and so knowing that our plug's going to live right here, I went and started with our run of diode wiring, and I just leave an extra length of it. That way I can attach to it, because if you run short here, it can get a little bit tricky. So I would just give yourself maybe 8 inches past the plug, just so you have a little bit of room, and then we're going to start routing it back. Now, I went ahead and just drilled this out. That way I can get my breakaway switch wiring passed through here as well. And it's going to be looking pretty clean with some wire loom on it later. You can find a bunch of different ways to pass that wiring in. It's kind of up to you. But the main thing is we're going to have to find a nice, easy way to pass this back. From back here, I just went ahead and started running it up to the driver's side, because we're going to be tying into this for our braking system. So right now I have it still pretty loose. I'm going to come back later with some wire loom to clean it up. But running along the frame rail, I make sure to stay away from any suspension or exhaust, and that's kind of where sometimes it can get tricky. Now, because our braking system requires our tying into the diode wiring, I ran this up and close to the grommet on the firewall, and that way I can attach our wire. So I pulled up a good amount of length, which on a Jeep, especially just being a Wrangler, you have plenty of extra wire. The wheelbase is pretty short, so it can't hurt to run a little extra up. And your braking system may not require tying into the diodes, and if that's the case, you can continue running it straight back. And the exhaust is right here, so I kind of routed it up on the top of the frame rail, just zip tying it up to this factory wire loom, and I made my way back. Now at this point, I split off my white wire and cut off a section. You can see I went ahead and used the factory ground here with the ring terminal that was included. So we do need to ground it, and twofold, as we peel that white wire back and cut the excess, we're going to use that excess wire to become our jumper for our running lights. From there, I just kind of, again, followed some of the factory wire loom brackets and made my way over to the cross member that we have here. And at this point, I split it off because our green's going to go over to our passenger side for our right turn signal. Our yellow and brown, I split over and ran that up to our driver's side. And you can see we have our wiring ready to pull up to our taillights. So our next step is to get our taillights taken out. Now we're going to be tying into the plug that goes into your taillight. So we do need to take the taillight out. It's also going to allow us to have a spot to pull our wires up. And if you've never taken your taillights out on your Wrangler, it's pretty easy. You're going to go inside where there's a plastic cap. And you're going to see there's a little notch here, so you can maybe use your fingernail, but I'm using a trim panel tool. You just kind of pry underneath this, and that's going to allow us to get to our hardware, which is going to be a 10mm plastic screw. You can also use a Phillips here, but a 10mm goes on that, and it's just a spring-loaded clip. So we'll loosen that up and get it removed. Now you can kind of just leave this in place. It does come out if you want, but it sits there pretty easily. And at that point, once it's loose, our taillight comes out pretty easily. Just kind of wobble it back and forth, and then this should slide out. Now we are going to be tying into this portion of the plug. So if you want to, you can go ahead and separate the plug from the taillight just to give you a little bit of extra room here. So just with the trim panel tool, I'm going to go ahead and remove this. And then we'll separate our plug by pulling up on this tab and then pushing down. Sometimes these can be a little bit tricky, but just kind of work it back and forth while pushing that tab, and we'll get this separated. Now there is some insulation tape here. We're going to want to peel this back, so just be real careful. You can make a small cut in just the tape. Make sure your wires are all there. You don't want to damage those. But once you get this kind of slit back, we'll be able to unravel this, and that's going to allow us to get to the wires we need to. Now there's two wires we're going to be tying into, and the first one is going to be our yellow. That's going to be our turn signal. Now coming to our running lights, it is a white and gray, but something you'll notice is there's a white and gray that's a thicker gauge as well as a thinner gauge white and gray. So to determine which one is the proper one for our running lights, I went ahead and I'm using my light tester to figure that out, and it brings me to this pin, which is the thicker gauge white and gray. So just make sure that you're putting those together, find the thicker one, and that's going to be the wire that we want. So now that we've determined the wires that we're going to be tying into, I'll go ahead and cut these back. Now I always try to go a little bit further back, not too close to the plug, and that way when we get this all put back in place, it's not super close to this. You have a little bit more room to move around. Now, the Jeeps are pretty open, so it's not too terribly crucial here, but we'll snip our thicker gauge white and gray and our yellow, and then we're just going to go ahead and strip back both ends on both wires. So grab one of your diodes and you can start pulling off your spade connectors, as we're going to be using these to make our attachments. So the ones that are going to be closer to our plug, these are going to go to the out on the diode. So we'll go ahead and put our blue spade connectors on both of these ends. Now what I do, because the wire gauge is pretty thin, just to kind of give it a little bit more bite, I strip back just a little extra and then bend the end. That seems to have it be able to attach to these spade connectors a little bit better. And then we'll just go ahead and crimp these down. And throughout all of these, once I crimp them, I go ahead and just kind of give it just a slight tug. You don't want these coming loose and then having to trace a wire that wasn't crimped down properly. So just go ahead and test it while you install them. Now I'm going to put the blue spade connector on our yellow wire on this end. Our running light, though, we're going to be tying in our extra white wire that we spliced off from that ground. That way we can jump it over to our passenger sides. So go ahead and get our blue spade connectors put on all our strip back wiring. At this point, we're going to want to pull up our yellow and brown wire through the bottom, and the best way that I've found to do that is we use an airline tube to pass it down, but you can actually take just normal wire like this, and if you want, you can tie a little like nut on here or something just for a little bit of weight. Pass this down, tape your wires, and then you can pull it up. So I got my fish wire kind of fed through there. Also make sure that it's not wrapped around any exhaust or moving parts. Now I'm going to tape up my yellow-brown and also my jumper wire here. That way we can make our connections to the diodes. And pull up all your extra slack. So I'll go ahead and cut our yellow and brown wire here, and I'll split this and strip these ends back. Now our yellow wire is going to get our blue spade connector. And then our brown wire is our running light, and again this has to jump over to the other side. So I'll go ahead and strip back our jumper wire here, and then we'll grab our yellow spade connector and make this connection. We're using the yellow because it's larger gauge, so it allows us to get both of those wires twisted up together and still be able to crimp down on our spade connector. So now that we have all of our wires with spade connectors, we'll just go ahead and make our connections. So starting at the plug, you'll grab your diode, and the out is going to face towards the plug, or towards the factory plug here. So we can go ahead and get these snapped in. And then you're going to want to take the corresponding color. So we have our white and gray here. You'll just plug the white and gray to the other side. Doesn't matter which side it is. And then on this one, we'll take our yellow and do the same thing. And then our wires that we pulled up, pretty easy. Yellow goes to yellow. So we'll attach that. And also make sure there's a gap here. You want to make sure that spade connector, that male end, goes directly into the female end. It should kind of feel like it snaps in, but it is pretty easy to slide it up in between the plastic. So just make sure you have a good connection there. Get our jumper wire and our running lights there. And then at this point, what I'll do is I take a little bit of electrical tape and just kind of wrap it around our existing wiring, and that way it's not going to pull on these wires and spade connectors long term. You do have a double-sided adhesive here as well, so if you want, you can peel one of these back and stick these together. So we have all of these connections made. It's all taped up. We'll go ahead and make our connection back to our factory plug. Lock this in place. And you should be able to get this snapped in place as well. Go ahead and get our taillight put back in place. And then we're going to route that jumper wire over to our passenger side. So we'll go ahead and get our taillight taken out and our insulation peeled back just as we did on this side. And I'll show you the connections made on there. So on this side, pretty easy. The green is going to go to, well, that's going to be our turn signal, and then our orange and white will be our running light signal. So pretty easy here. We'll make our green attachments, and then our wire that we pulled up that's green will also go to that. And then our jumper wire, which in this case is our white, will go to the white and orange. I'm going to get this side buttoned up with tape, and then I'll show you how I ran my jumper wire underneath the vehicle. I just ran kind of tucked behind our heat shield, and that'll keep it protected from the heat and also just out of the way of our exhaust. From there, I just routed this through the frame hole. I also matched up with my green wire that I routed over here before pulling it up. Now, depending on your kit, yours may have come with a 6-pole, but our towbar came with it, so it'll attach just the same. And what we're going to do to get this all attached is take our boot, slide this down and back, and then you'll see that there's small little Phillips head screws, and we're going to back that out and strip these ends and put these in, tighten it down. Now, you don't want to get too crazy. You don't want to damage the wires. And also, if you are doing a charge line, you're going to want to tie that in as well to this taller little pole here. So again, if you are doing a charge line on your vehicle, tie it in at this point. Now, there's going to be letters that are molded into the plug that's going to denote where we're going to go with these. So I'll get mine attached and then walk you through exactly where they go. So our 12 o'clock position, we have our brown wire, and the letters that you're going to find corresponding are going to be TM for tail marker. Then moving along, we have GD for our ground, so that's going to be white. Our left turn signal is going to be our yellow, which is LT, and then our right turn signal is green, which is RT. So once these are tightened down, what we'll do is we'll get our boot placed on here. Now you can backfill this with some black silicone just to kind of seal it all up, but regardless, I'm going to put some electrical tape around here just to kind of make sure that it's nice and sealed from any elements. It's also a good time if you want to run some wire loom just to kind of clean this up. You can tie that in as well. So now we'll get our plug mounted up. Now, depending on your base plate, yours may have a bracket like this. This is a Roadmaster, but some of the other ones will have a post where you're just going to run a self-tapping screw through the center. Either way, we'll go ahead and get this mounted up. Now before hitting the road, we're going to want to make sure that our diodes are working properly. And I'm going to be using a test box here that's going to simulate hooking up to your RV. So you probably don't have a test box like this, so take your umbilical and then you're going to hook up to the 7-pole on your RV and run through the light sequence on the RV with someone watching the taillights just to make sure they're all working. So I'll start off with my running lights. Next I'll do my left turn signal, my right turn signal, and then finally my brakes. And that was a look and installation of the Roadmaster diode wiring kit for a 2021 Jeep Wrangler.